because of this. He also gave it on Fat Tuesday, was tonight, which is Mardi Gras, which creates a lot of extra spiritual warfare. So that's why this 2-week window is going to be so explosive. Now, he said, America's momentum is back. Our spirit is back. Our pride is back. Now, you have to take pride figuratively, because we know what the word of God says about pride. Right? Pride cometh before destruction and a haughty spirit before a big fall. But he means the spirit of America that the Democrats are doing, right? All of a sudden, the Republicans with a roar start chanting USA and drown out the yelling and the booing of the mules and the donkeys that are kicking and stubborn in the middle of this, and the Republicans with a roar chant USA in the room. It was almost deafening. Then Donald Trump goes on. We won counties, a lot of counties in the country. He said it was over 2,700 counties, and he said a map that reads almost all red for Republican. He said there was a 27-point swing, the most ever. And then he goes into the logistics of the economy, right? So he starts at small business optimism. It's a 41-point jump. Now, when he does this, the Democrats are being some of these states here into the lawmaking process. So they are being so disruptive at this point that Speaker Johnson stands up, and you can see the righteous indignation on the man when he stands up, and he says he will instruct the sergeant at arms to restore order in the joint session of Congress, and the Republicans erupt in the room. And then an exchange happens between Speaker Johnson, I think his name is Al Green. He wouldn't stop, and he was waving his cane, which I wish somebody would have grabbed and just swatted him on the head with and just put an end to the nonsense that we were seeing. But Lord, I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't say those things. But really, if I was there, I would have grabbed his cane with, and it would have been over. Like, we would have been done. But anyway, this exchange goes on, and then he announces, Speaker Johnson, in a very dramatic moment, that the chair directs the sergeant at arms to restore order and remove Green from the chamber. Members are directed to uphold and maintain decorum in the House, and the House erupts, and the sergeant at arms comes out, and they remove Al Green in front of everybody from the president's address. Then once order is restored, he says 100 executive orders have been signed in 6 weeks and over 400 executive actions, which is equal, because that equals 500. And we are in the year 5785. 5 has to not only do with grace, but it has to do with an announcement. And this certainly is an announcement. Actually, our presidency is the most successful in the history of our nation. He said number 2 was George Washington. Within hours of taking the oath of office, he says, I declared a national emergency at our southern border and the invasion of our country. Illegal border crossings last month were the lowest ever recorded, he says. Under Joe Biden, the worst president in American history, the Democratic hyenas, they start getting upset again. Hundreds of thousands of illegal crossings per month. Drug dealers, murderers, gangs released into our country under Joe Biden, he's saying. Okay. As this is going on, the Pepto-Bismol pink Democrats are holding up a black sign that says Musk steals. And so they're holding up I thought, wait a second. This is hypocrisy at its finest. After you thieves have stolen so much from the American people, how dare you, even in a moment like this, accuse Elon Musk of stealing when you have had your hand in the cookie jar? You have been draining our coffers. You have been giving our tax dollars to illegal immigrants, $6 billion to Iran, billions to Ukraine, and Zippy Zelensky, who can't seem to sit still or has no manners whatsoever. As well as insider trading, as well as funding transgenderism, corrupt school districts, and they want to hold up a sign that says Musk steals. No, Musk actually isn't stealing. Musk is actually going in like the sheriff and getting back what you stole from the American people. So they're doing this in the middle of this. Now, And he says to the Democrats, Trump addresses the Democrats now. And he says to the Democrats sitting before him, he said, just this one night, why not join us in celebrating so many incredible wins for America, for the good of our nation? Let us work together to make America great again, which they didn't take too kindly to. Why would they? And he said also, upon taking office, I imposed a freeze on all federal hiring and federal regulations and all foreign aid. I terminated the ridiculous Green New Scam and withdrew from the Paris Climate Accord, costing us trillions. I withdrew from the corrupt World Health Organization and also from the anti-American UN Human Rights Council. He's withdrawn us from that has been hurting America. And then he goes in to tackle, he talks about the economy, wants to tackle the economy. He said, for every one new regulation, 10 old regulations must be eliminated. So that was amazing. For every one new regulation they implement, 10 old regulations have to be eliminated in the economy. He said, we have ended weaponized government. For example, where a sitting president was allowed to viciously prosecute his political opponent like me. And then he looks at the Democrats and he goes, how did that work out? Not too well, did it? And oh boy, did he rile them up when he said that. And the Republicans are roaring when he's saying this. They're all standing and applauding. The Democrats in their Pepto-Bismol attire are holding up the must steal signs. And another woman had a sign that said, it's a lie. Ma'am, do you know what party you belong to? Do you know what they've even done? Do you know they lied about Joe Biden's mental capacity? They lied about DEI, Kamala Harris. Do you even know the sign you're holding up at this point? So this goes on. He also says, I have stopped all government censorship and have brought back free speech. In America, it's back. Free speech is back. And that also goes to Caesar's. And Donald Trump is saying it. President Trump is saying it. Free speech is back. He also says that 2 days in, he signed an order making English the official language of the United States of America. It's about flipping time, honestly, that we make English the official language of the United States of America. He says, I renamed the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. And likewise, I renamed Mount McKinley again in Alaska. We have ended the tyranny of the so-called DEI policies across the federal government, private sector, and our military, which stands for diversity and inclusion. And our country, he says, will be woke no longer. Now, that was a great line. The interesting part about wokeism is it goes back to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. When the serpent says to Eve, if you eat of this fruit, you surely will not die. For in the day you eat of the fruit, your eyes will be opened. You'll become woke. That's what that means. You'll become enlightened. So this is a very ancient argument and agenda of the enemy repurposed for a modern day generation. He says our country will be woke no longer. He said, you should be hired based on skill and competence, not race or gender. Man should be judged not by the color of his skin, but by the content of his character. You should be hired based on merit. And he said the Supreme Court, in a very brave and powerful decision, has allowed us to do so. So he acknowledges and applauds the Supreme Court. He said there are only two genders, male and female. He said that's the official policy of the U.S. government. Hallelujah. God made Adam and Eve. He didn't make Adam and Steve. He didn't make amoebas. He did not make transgenders. God made them male and female. So Donald Trump now is saying the official policy of the U.S. government is there are only two genders, male and female. He also said he signed an executive order to ban men from playing in women's sports. Hallelujah to that too. If they can't hack it by playing with men and they think they're going to get a gold star by coming into women's sports, think again, because that is over with. He said schools will kick men off of girls' teams or lose all federal funding. That was huge. Schools either comply and kick biological men off of women's teams or they will lose all their federal funding. That was amazing. He said he's rescued our economy. He's going to rescue the economy and get immediate relief to working families. who inherited from the last administration an economic catastrophe and an inflation nightmare. That is true. The last administration apparently got their economics out of a Cracker Jack box, and they most definitely caused economic catastrophe and inflation that we have not seen in decades. He said it drove up the grocery costs, and we are fighting to reverse this damage and make America affordable again. That was a great line. He said, Joe, let the price of eggs get out of control. When he said this, don't ask me why this set them off. Maybe because they were wearing pastels like Easter eggs, the Democrats. I'm not sure. But he says, Joe, let the price of eggs get out of control. And the Democrats erupted. They got so mad at that line. And Donald Trump said, we are working hard to get it back down. So for those of you who miss your omelets in the morning, Donald Trump is working to restore that again in your life and get the price of eggs down. And so the Democrats were reeling again after this and seething. So he said, we are rapidly reducing the cost of energy. And he said the previous administration cut gas and oil by 95%, and I believe that's the production of it. He said, my first day in office, I declared a natural energy emergency. And he said his policy to fix this is drill, baby, drill. That's what he said. That is the policy, drill, baby, drill. I so agree with that. America is sitting on oil. Why not drill and get our own resources and become energy independent, where not Iran, Saudi Arabia, Europe, Russia, or any other place can try to hold natural resources over our heads and make us kowtow to their agendas? Why not become energy independent? So I agree with that, drill, baby, drill. Okay. He said, I will take historic action to expand production of critical minerals and rare earths here in the USA. So he's doing that as well. And he said, to further combat inflation, we will be reducing the cost of energy and ending the flagrant waste of taxpayer dollars. Now, that was a great word he used, flagrant, whoever wrote this for him, because in sports, in the NBA, there is something in basketball, and I played basketball as in my teens. There is something called a flagrant foul. A flagrant is when it is highly intentional and meant to do damage. That's what a flagrant foul is. So when he's saying this, ending the flagrant, ending the highly intentional, meant to do damage waste of taxpayer dollars. Let me put it to you that way. He said, that is why I created Doge. Well, he said Doge, they all erupted. And here's Elon Musk standing up, doing his waving to everybody. When he says Doge, he goes, that's why I created Doge. Perhaps you have heard of it. Now, when this happens, they pan to a shot of Pocahontas, who is Elizabeth Warren, on her phone, acting like she's not hearing any of this. So Elizabeth Warren, aka Pocahontas, in her pastels, is on her phone. Her phone case is pastel also, and acting like she completely has no idea what Doge is. Typical par for the course. He says Elon works very hard and he didn't need this. No, he probably didn't. Elon has enough companies and influence. He really didn't need this. He has been assigned to this at Doge. And let me read to you the list of some of the things Elon has found at Doge, because Donald Trump wanted to oblige everyone. And he wanted to let everybody know some of the things that Elon and his team have uncovered at Doge. $22 billion from HHS to provide free housing and cars for illegal immigrants. $45 million was sent to DEI. $40 million to sedentary migrants. I have no clue. Is that migrants that don't move? I have no clue, but sedentary migrants. $8 million to promote LGBTQ plus XYZ. There was money going to African nations for indigenous peoples. $60 million to indigenous peoples, $8 million for making mice transgender. Yes, $8 million of your tax dollars went to try to make mice transgender. Have you ever heard of something so sick? This is why the flood happened in Genesis. This is why the flood came, of them altering DNA like this. Okay, so this is like pre-flood, you know, horror show that was going on in the earth. So 8 million of your tax dollars went to make mice transgender. 32 million for left-wing propaganda in Moldova. So if you would like to know that 32 million of your tax dollars went so left-wing propaganda could be active in a country called Moldova. 10 million, this was wild. 10 million of your tax dollars went for circumcisions in Mozambique, went to circumcise little boys in Mozambique. 20 million of your tax dollars was sent to the Arab Sesame Street in the Middle East. So 20 million of your tax dollars went to fund Sesame Street for Arabs in the Middle East. Illegal aliens to be in luxury hotels in New York City. 42 million went for social and behavior change in Uganda. 47 million for improving learning outcomes in Asia. And 101 million went to DEI contracts at the Department of Education. And you wonder why they've got so much money to just try to screw up your kids on you. 101 million went to DEI contracts at the Department of Education. So he said others he wanted to say are just too horrible to say. So this is the list he gave. He said, we found hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud. He said, we have taken back the money and reduced our debt to fight inflation. He said the Government Accountability Office estimated annual fraud of $500 billion in our nation. $500 billion in fraud annually in our nation. And then he went into Social Security fraud, where Social Security checks are being paid out. Now, this is just to nobody. It's not like it's just to anybody. Let me read to you who Social Security checks were paid out to. 3.6 million people received Social Security checks who were the ages of 110 to 119. 3.47 million people ages 120 to 129 received Social Security checks. 3.9 million people ages 130 to 139 received these checks. 3.5 million, 140 years old to 149 years old, received Social Security checks. Money is being paid to most of them, if not many of them. 1.3 million people that were ages 150 to 159 received Social Security checks. 130,000 people that were over the age of 160 years old received Social Security. Isn't that comforting for all of us? Okay. Now, he interjects in the middle of this, Donald Trump, and he says, we have a healthier country than I thought, Bobby. Talking to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So after saying all this, he goes, our country's way healthier than we thought, isn't it, Bobby? 1,039 people between the ages of 220 years old and 229 received Social Security. One person who was 240 years old to 249 years old received it. One person who was 360 years of age received Social Security. That's more than 100 years older than our country, Donald Trump says. So this is how many people are fraudulent, how much fraud is happening in Social Security. He said, by slashing off fraud, waste, and theft, we will defeat inflation, bring down grocery prices, and put more money in the pockets of American families. That is true, because the more disposable income, I'm putting my finance hat on here. Disposable income is when, after you've paid all your bills, the money you have left over at the end of the month. That is called disposable income. The more disposable income you put into families' households, the more they will interject it into the economy. And that is how the economy grows. Okay. He said this year, let's see. He talked about interest rates that dropped. And then he said, this year I want to balance the federal budget. That has not been done in 24 years. And then he said, we have developed the gold card. Now, this is interesting. For $5 million, we will allow people to buy a path to American citizenship. So the gold card, $5 million, people can buy an American citizenship. He said, the open border policies you have allowed to destroy our country. We will now bring in job creating people and reduce our debt with that money. So he's using that to reduce the debt. He's using for every $5 million paid for a gold card to become an American citizen, it helps reduce the debt. He said, Americans have given us a mandate for bold and profound change. That is so true. He said, the federal bureaucracy has grown over 100 years and crushed America. Approvals that should take 10 days are taking 10 to 15 years because of all the bureaucracy and red tape. He said, we will restore true democracy to America again. The days of bureaucrats are over. He also said the next phase of our plan is for Congress to pass tax cuts for everybody. He was directly speaking to the Democrats. He also wants to end the Social Security tax. Then he gets into the tariffs. Now he's getting into the heavyweights here. So now we come to the tariffs. He said, we have tariffs right now being charged to us by India, China, Mexico. He said India is 100% tariff on all our goods that go into India. China is double. He said South Korea, their tariff is 4 times higher. He said this is happening by friend and foe. Friends are tariffing the United States of America. Foes are tariffing the United States of America. He said April 2nd. Now, he said, I'm doing it April 2nd because April 1st is April Fool's, and that would be a very expensive joke. He said, so I've chosen to do it April 2nd instead. But April 2nd, he said there's going to be a reciprocal tariff that kicks in, and whatever the tariff they are doing to us, we are going to do to them. So if it's 100% tariff on our goods going into that country, we are going to charge that country 100% tariff on goods coming into our country. Whatever they tax us, we will tax them. He says if they do non-monetary tariffs to keep us out of their markets, we will do non-monetary tariffs to keep them out of our markets. He said, we will take in trillions of dollars and create jobs this way. We have been ripped off for decades by almost every country on earth. We will not let that happen any longer. Mexico and Canada have allowed fentanyl to come into our country and kill and destroy families, he says. They are receiving subsidies of hundreds of billions of dollars. The U.S. will not be doing this any longer, he says. $1.7 trillion of new investment in America in the past couple of weeks alone, he says, has happened. He said OpenAI and Oracle announced a $500 billion investment. Watch the head of Oracle. Watch him, because he's got an interest in this because he wants something approved that his son is involved in, that they're trying to get through red tape in the government. I don't trust Oracle, right? And I think of Oracle at Delphi when I hear Oracle, somebody that is speaking for the demonic, somebody that is under the influence of dark forces. That's what I think when I hear Oracle in that sense, like the Oracle at Delphi. He also said, our new trade policy will be great for the American farmer. I love the farmer. That will now be selling in the USA. The farmers will be selling in the USA because the goods that come in from other countries, they are dirty, he said, and disgusting and hurt our farmers. So basically saying the produce coming in from other countries are dirty and disgusting and will hurt our farmers. I can't disagree with him on that. And I can't, because these foreign countries inject the fruits and vegetables with things. They inject the produce with things. They put chemicals in them. He's not wrong. So he says 50 billion in purchases, but Biden did not enforce it. He's talking about the farmers still. Now, as Trump is saying this, they pan to the Democrats again. And there is the gentleman sitting next to Pocahontas, fast asleep. They pan to the Democrats, and the narcoleptics have suddenly come out. Narcolepsy is kicking in on the Democratic side, and the Democrats are sleeping in the audience. Okay. Then he starts pointing out people that have been invited. A gentleman named Jeff, who was a steel worker, provided a foster home for over 40 children, which is amazing. Um, and he talks about wanting to protect American jobs. He said, and the soul of our country. Now that's interesting because Joe Biden said, now let me say, if the Lord can speak through the mouth of an ass, he could probably speak through the mouth of Joe Biden. But Joe Biden said, this is a battle for the soul of the nation. I talk about this in the Revelationary War, the book of my book that's coming out April 1st. Joe Biden said that. Donald Trump says that we have to protect American jobs and the soul of the country. Isn't that interesting? One's trying to battle and snatch it away from us. The other's trying to protect it. He said, Biden took us the lowest we have ever been. And then he acknowledges his lovely wife, Melania, the first lady, for all her work with foster care, which you could see she didn't expect he was going to do. But he looks at her affectionately. He acknowledges her for all her amazing work with foster care. And then he says, because there was a lovely young girl sitting next to Melania, apparently she was affected by AI deep fake. Something was put up about her. It was just something disturbing. So he says that they have the Take It Down Act having to do with AI deep fakes now. So they've actually created an act because AI deep fakes are now becoming such a problem. He said, he then talks about the steps that are crucial to protecting America's borders. 21 million poured in last year because of Joe Biden's insane and very dangerous open border policies. He thanked Tom Homan. I was on the Israel trip with Tom Homan, so I got to hang out with Tom Homan in Israel last year. So he thanked Tom Homan and Border Patrol and ICE for the job they have done. These guys are working overtime. They're doing an amazing job. They're dealing with dangerous gang members, criminals, terrorists, and are rounding them up and risking their lives in order to get them out of the nation. And we just thank you for your service. He said, we must take care of our law enforcement. And then he brings up Laken Riley. Now, this was a moment because Laken Riley's mother was in the audience. So he brings up what happened to Laken Riley. And that she was murdered by an illegal immigrant. And the assailant was arrested and released in a Democrat-run sanctuary city. And he said, we are going to ensure Laken Riley did not die in vain. He says, I signed into law the detention of all criminal aliens that threaten public safety. It's called the Laken Riley Act. So he actually named an act out of this precious girl. He said, we achieved the lowest number of border crossovers ever recorded. The media kept saying we needed new legislation to secure the border. He says, it turns out all we needed was a new president. That was a mic drop moment when he said that. The Republicans erupted. The Democrats are booing. They're foaming at the mouth. They're seething. They're getting very upset. But that was an incredible line. It turns out all we needed was a new president. He said, Joe Biden didn't just open our border. He flew illegal aliens over them to overwhelm our schools and communities. And then he says, we are achieving the great liberation of America. I signed an order keeping my word to you. And then Jocelyn was another young girl that was, I guess, killed by an illegal immigrant. And he said to her mother, who was there, a 34,000-acre sanctuary, because Jocelyn loved wildlife and she loved animals. And he said a 34,000-acre sanctuary for all of God's creatures is formally renamed that refuge in loving memory of your beautiful daughter, Jocelyn. So that was a wonderful moment too. And he said Jocelyn and Laken's assailants were both part of it was a very dangerous Venezuelan gang, along with MS-13 and the cartels. He says, I have now named them foreign terrorist organizations. They are in a category now with ISIS. So he has designated them finally. Hallelujah. Praise the Lord. They have been designated foreign terrorist organizations. He said every last one will be rounded up and forcibly removed from our country. I'm telling you, the cartels are going to try something against the president. I'm just telling you right now. That is gearing up. It's time for America to wage war on the cartels, he says. So he is making a proclamation of war publicly within the 2-week window to Purim against the cartels. That is prophetic. That is historic. It's by no accident that it happened this way. He said 5 nights ago, Mexican authorities, because of our tariff policies, handed over to us 29 of the biggest cartel leaders in their country. Now, when the house of Ahab was being cleared out, Jehu, this was a Jehu moment, what Trump just did, and what he said. Jehu said to the people, I will not destroy you if you hand over all the sons of Ahab. No, all the sons yes, all the sons, I believe, of Ahab. So Jehu says, I will not destroy you if you hand me over the sons of Ahab. And the city got together and they handed over the sons of Ahab to Jehu. In the same way, President Trump applies pressure. The Mexican authorities, because of the tariff policies, handed over to Donald Trump, who's like a Jehu, 29 of the biggest cartel leaders in their country. That was a Jehu moment. He said, we need Mexico and Canada to do much more than they have done and stop fentanyl and drugs coming across the borders. I totally agree. He said, we must bring back law and order to our cities and towns. Long before the TV show ever existed, Almighty God was a God of law and order. And he still is a God of law and order. And Donald Trump saying that is prophetic because it's about restoring the spiritual law and order to this nation as well. It's about restoring the physical law and order to our cities and towns and the spiritual law and order that only God can bring to a nation. He said, our justice system has been turned upside down by radical left lunatics. And he points to the Democrats in the room. He's going, radical left lunatics. And he's doing that while he's making this statement, which once again, they start yelling like hyenas. What a surprise. And then he says, we need to restore fair, equal, and impartial justice, starting at the FBI and the DOJ. He acknowledges Pam Bondi and Kash Patel. He said, bad guys don't respect the law, but they are starting to respect it, is what he said. He said, I signed an executive order requiring the death penalty for anyone who kills a police officer. And tonight I'm asking Congress to pass that. I guess there's another part to that he wants Congress to pass, but he signed an executive order saying the death penalty has to be given to anyone who kills a police officer. He says, I'm also asking Congress for a new crime bill. And then we go to Precious Little DJ, I think is his name. The 13-year-old little boy who had brain cancer. He was so adorable and precious. And Trump asked for him to be made an agent of the United States Secret Service. That was his dream. It was an amazing moment. It was very touching when the head of the Secret Service let DJ hug him and just thank him for doing that. And Donald Trump said since 1975, childhood cancer has increased by 40%. Notice the number 40. 40 has to do with testing and judgment and a wilderness time. So isn't that interesting that since 1975, cancer has increased, childhood cancer, by 40%. Trump acknowledges R.F. Kennedy Jr., Bobby Kennedy, at this time. He said, with the name Kennedy, you would have thought everyone would have been cheering. And he looks at the Democrats again. He liked trolling them all night. He really did. He was just really enjoying trolling them. And we were enjoying watching him troll them. He said we have to get poisons out of our food supply and keep our children healthy and strong. He said at one point it was 1 in 10,000 children, I believe, that had autism. Now it's 1 in 36 children that have autism. He said something is very, very wrong with this. He said there are toxic ideologies in our schools. And then he said they, them pronouns are being removed from the schools. I signed an executive order banning our public schools from indoctrinating our schools with transgender ideology. I also signed an order to cut off federal funding to any institution that aids in mutilating our youth, any institution that is sterilizing children that is making them think they were born the wrong gender will not receive federal funding anymore. This is huge because the financial arteries now are being pinched. The financial arteries. God is doing a heart procedure in this nation. And there are arteries right now that are being pinched and cut off and rerouted in the middle of this. And this is one of them. He said it's a big lie that children are trapped in the wrong body. He said that's a lie that children are being told. You are perfect exactly the way God made you. That was a wonderful, wonderful line. He said all armed services are having the best recruiting results ever. In, I guess, as far as decades or longer than that, our recruiting is highly up, let's put it that way, in the armed services. He says he's establishing an office of shipbuilding in the White House. My administration will be reclaiming the Panama Canal. A large American company announced they are buying both ports around the Panama Canal. So the United States is reclaiming it. I do believe there is going to be some type of war or scuffle with China over it, because I believe they're the ones right now that have a great interest in the Panama Canal. He says, I have a message for the people of Greenland. So then he goes all the way to Greenland. You knew he was going to say Greenland. You knew he was going to bring this into the speech. He said, you deserve to consider the right of your future. However, we welcome Greenland into the United States of America. So he talks about that. He then mentions bringing home the hostages from Gaza. Haman and Hamas are separated by one letter. Just one letter. Bringing back the hostages from Gaza. He said, in my first term, we achieved the historic Abraham Accords, that the United States has sent hundreds of billions to support Ukraine defense with no security. He said, you want to keep it going? You want to keep it going another 5 years? And then he says, Pocahontas says yes, and looked right at Elizabeth Warren and basically called her out while she was pretending not to hear him on her cell phone. So he said that. He said 2,000 people are being killed every week, Russians and Ukrainians, but I want it to stop. Europe has spent more money buying Russian oil and gas than they have defending Ukraine, he said. He wants Ukraine and other prime ministers to come to the negotiating table. He was giving a public call for Zippy Zelensky and the other prime ministers to come to the negotiating table about this. He says, I want peace from Russia and Ukraine. It's time to halt the killing and end the senseless war. If you want to end wars, you have to talk to both sides. That was a very wise statement he made. If you want to end wars, you have to talk to both sides. Because remember, they were being very critical of him in the media for trying to talk to Putin. But he's saying if you want to end the war, you have to talk to both sides. That is a very wise and practical way of looking at it. He said, we brought an American hostage home from Russia. 22 days in office, Trump is. He brings this gentleman home who you can tell has been through the ringer being a hostage in Russia. His name is Mark. Now, this is where it gets wild. Mark was born in the small rural town of Butler, Pennsylvania, where his mother has lived for 78 years. Why is this prophetic? Butler, Pennsylvania is where they attempted to assassinate Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is 78 years old. So this man was born in Butler, Pennsylvania, the hostage he freed from Russia. And the mother has lived there for 78 years, and that is the age of Donald Trump right now. That is highly prophetic in itself. He said that he met Mark's mom before he walked on stage at Butler, Pennsylvania. Less than 10 minutes later, he said, Donald Trump says, gunfire rang out and a sick, deranged assassin unloaded 8 bullets. You know why 8? The enemy is very intentional about what he does. 8 biblically is the number of new beginnings because they wanted Donald Trump gone and they wanted to make their own new beginning. That is no accident. He said, my life was saved by a fraction of an inch. It was, and then he went into the fireman that lost his life. Corey, the fireman that horribly lost his life at that rally, protecting his family. And then Donald Trump honors his family. And then Donald Trump says, President Trump says, I believe my life was saved in Butler. I was saved by God. to make that say, I was saved by God. And I went on Clay Clark's podcast and said, President Trump, please stop saying that. It's not some say you were saved. You were saved by God. You need to say you were saved by God. You need to acknowledge what God has done for you. And tonight, he acknowledged it. He said he was saved by God to make America great again. He truly believes that. He said we will always be free and we will fight for that freedom. We are a country of doers, dreamers, fighters, and survivors. This will be our greatest era with God's help over the next 4 years. He invoked the name of God quite a bit in this address. It was also the longest address, I believe, a president has given to a joint session of Congress. So with God's help over the next 4 years, we will lead the most dynamic and dominant civilization on earth. We are going to conquer the frontiers of science, he says. He says we want to plant the American flag on Mars. Well, people can have dreams, can't they? I guess one of his is to plant the American flag on Mars and far beyond. Now, isn't that interesting? Because guess who wants to occupy Mars? Elon Musk. So Elon Musk wears a shirt a lot that says Occupy Mars. We will stand up and fight, which is what he said the day of Butler, for the country we believe in and the country our citizens deserve. The golden age of America has only just begun and will be like nothing ever seen before. And that's how he ends it. I'm sure the Democrats gave a rebuttal that was like nails on a chalkboard. I have not listened to the Democrats' rebuttal yet. I will try to listen to it and see basically what they had to say. But I thought it was an incredibly dynamic, sensitive, poignant speech. It wasn't, he had his little jabs in there that Donald Trump's hallmark is, but there was wisdom in it. There was a reverence for God. There was truth in it. There was a lot of truth about what has gone on in this nation that has been wrong, how much fraud has been committed, what has been done to the American people, and how he's going to fix it. So I thought it really was an incredible joint session of Congress, explosive, because it's in the window of Purim. Speaker Johnson having to stand up and remove Al Green and his cane from that joint session right off the bat and get the Sergeant of Arms involved. That is explosive for a joint session of Congress where the new president is the one addressing. So this really has started out explosive. I believe this window is just going to get more intense leading up to Purim. It's interesting, like I said, the 2-week window to Purim, Trump's address, and Mardi Gras all clashed. It was a physical manifestation of the spiritual war we're fighting. You have the kingdom of darkness and those that serve the kingdom of darkness, and you have those that are servants of the Lord. And it clashed on the same day. So really what that is a physical manifestation of what actually is happening in the realm of the spirit right now that we have to be very aware of. So I thought it was great. I thought it was one of his best. As far as the tone, as far as it was a very presidential tone that he took. There wasn't a lot of like boasting, or puffed out feathers. He took his little jabs. He did those things, but he was very focused on the task at hand. And you can see he's changing. You can see the heaviness of the yoke, even though the Lord's yoke is light. You can see the weight of the yoke of God beginning to come on Donald Trump. You can actually begin to see it now coming upon him to steer him. And so thought, it was quite amusing to watch. And go Speaker Johnson for just standing up with the righteous indignation of the Lord and having the disruptors removed, because Satan is a disruptor. Satan wants to draw attention off of what the Lord wants to say, and he wants to draw it onto him. So go Speaker Johnson for discerning that under the wisdom of God, to not let that
You have passed the entrance office. Drive safely.